I wasn't supposed to feel anything selling that car. It was just metal and memories, a leftover piece of a life I'd already grieved. The sunlight hit the hood, turning the black paint into a mirror that caught my reflection. Composed, sunglasses on, one hand resting against the door as if I owned control itself. The kind of woman who never second-guesses her choices. That's the version of me I wanted the buyer to meet. But when he stepped out of his car, that version slipped, just for a second. He was young. Mid-20s, maybe. Sun-browned skin, tousled chestnut hair, and that effortless confidence men that age carry before the world teaches them restraint. His black shirt was open at the collar, a silver chain catching the daylight. I noticed the undone button before I even registered the way his eyes held mine. Steady, searching, and just a little too knowing. "Mrs. Hale," he said, his voice easy, warm. "Caroline," I corrected automatically. I don't really do Mrs. anymore. He smiled, the kind that slides under your guard before you realize it. "Caroline, then." He said my name like he'd said it before, like it tasted familiar. He circled the car slowly, running his hand along the polished edge. "You kept it in amazing shape." "I keep everything in amazing shape," I said. It came out sharper than I meant, but he laughed softly, like he liked the bite. It was supposed to be a simple transaction. Cash, paperwork, handshake, goodbye. But there was something about the way he moved, deliberate, unhurried, that unsettled the calm I'd built over the past year. I hadn't flirted with anyone since my husband's funeral. I hadn't even wanted to, and yet, there I was, watching this stranger's fingers brush over the steering wheel, thinking about the way he seemed to fill the driver's seat like it already belonged to him. He caught me looking. "Do you mind if I take it for a spin?" "Go ahead." "Come with me," he added. The words weren't a question, and before I could remind myself that I didn't do things like that, riding shotgun with strangers half my age, I was already walking around the front, sliding into the passenger seat. Inside, the car smelled faintly of leather and cologne. Not his, not my husband's, just time. He started the engine. The hum filled the silence between us. We pulled onto the street, sunlight washing through the windshield, soft and relentless. "So," he said casually, "your husband must have really loved this car." He did. My voice came out quieter than I expected. Too much, probably. He glanced at me, one eyebrow lifted. "And you?" "I loved the man, not his toys." He grinned. "I believe that." Something in his tone, respectful but edged with curiosity, made my chest tighten. I looked away, out at the palm-lined street sliding past. "You don't seem like the type who sells things easily," he said after a pause. "I don't, but keeping it felt like standing still." He nodded, eyes back on the road, fingers tapping the wheel. Sometimes letting go looks a lot like moving forward. I turned to study him, that mix of youth and confidence, the kind that doesn't come from arrogance but from honesty. "You talk like someone older than you look. Maybe I've had to grow up fast." He said it lightly, but something flickered in his jaw, a quiet pain he didn't name. I recognized it. Loss recognizes loss. The drive didn't last more than 10 minutes, but it stretched, heavy with unspoken things. When we pulled back into my driveway, I found myself not wanting it to end. He parked, turned the engine off, and looked at me for a moment before saying, "You know, you don't have to undersell yourself when you talk about him." "What do you mean?" "You said you loved him, like it's something past tense and polite. But the way you said it, it's still there." The words hit harder than they should have. Most people fumble around grief, offer sympathy, or change the subject. He didn't. He just saw it, and saw me. I swallowed, forced a smile. "You're very observant for someone who's buying a car." He smiled back. You're very hard to read for someone who says she's moved on. That was the first time I felt the air shift, subtle but undeniable. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded envelope of cash and held it out. For the car. Our fingers brushed as I took it. Just a second of contact, skin against skin, but it lingered like a static charge. He exhaled softly, stepped back, then hesitated. Would it be weird if I said this is the most interesting car purchase I've ever made? Depends on what makes it interesting. You. The word hung there, sunlight slicing through the stillness, my heartbeat too loud in my ears. I should have laughed it off, made a joke, something to deflect. But I didn't. I just watched him. The way he stood there in the light, easy, sure, a little reckless. Careful, I said finally. I might believe you. He smiled, slow and deliberate. Maybe I want you to. He started walking toward his car, but stopped halfway, turning back with that same grin. By the way, my name's Liam. Nice to meet you, Liam. I'll take good care of it, he said. Then, almost as an afterthought, tell your daughter hi for me. I blinked. I'm sorry? He hesitated, realizing something in my expression shifted. You're Caroline Hale, right? And your daughter's Paige? My breath caught. You know Paige? He nodded, the smile faltering just a little. We used to date, a couple years back. For a moment, the world tilted. Sunlight suddenly too bright, the sound of a passing car too sharp. I stood there, silent, the envelope still in my hand. He looked uneasy now, rubbing the back of his neck. I didn't mean to make it weird. I just didn't expect. It's not weird, I lied. My voice sounded calm, practiced, the same voice I'd used at the funeral, controlled, composed. He studied me, as if trying to read the storm I was refusing to show. You okay? I nodded. Of course. He gave me one last look, almost regretful, before getting into the car and driving away. I watched him go, the black vehicle gliding down the street until it disappeared into the brightness. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something other than grief. It wasn't peace. It wasn't closure. It was heat. Quiet, forbidden, and alive. I turned back toward the house, sunlight flooding across the driveway, my reflection still shimmering in the window. My fingers tingled where they'd brushed his. Maybe selling that car wasn't the end of something. Maybe it was the beginning of a mistake I was already too curious to stop. I told myself I wouldn't see him again. But 3 days later, I saw that same car, my late husband's car, parked outside the cafe I'd been going to every Thursday for years. It gleamed in the sunlight, familiar and foreign all at once. I froze on the sidewalk, coffee already ordered in my mind, pretending it didn't matter. But then he walked out. Liam black shirt again, sleeves rolled up this time, collar open just enough to show that silver chain against his tan skin. His eyes found me instantly, as if he'd known I'd show up, like he'd been waiting for the universe to hand him this coincidence. Caroline, he said, that same quiet confidence in his tone. You stalking your old car? I laughed despite myself. I should be asking if you're stalking my neighborhood. He grinned. Maybe I just have good taste in cars. And coffee. He gestured toward the door. Join me? I hesitated, but something in the way he said it, calm, easy, no pressure, made it impossible to refuse. So I followed him inside. The cafe was all sunlight and soft jazz, the smell of espresso thick in the air. We took a corner table near the window, where the light fell in golden stripes across the table. He ordered an iced latte. I ordered my usual. Black, no sugar. You always drink it that way? He asked. I like control, I said. His smile deepened. And does control like you back? I looked up at him, that boyish challenge in his eyes, the hint of something deeper behind it. Usually. We sat in silence for a while, both pretending to be comfortable, both failing. I could feel his gaze, Not invasive, but observant, patient. He wasn't looking at me the way men usually do when they flirt. He was watching me like he was trying to understand something I didn't even say. Finally, he broke the quiet. "Paige told me a lot about you," I stiffened. "Oh? Not bad things," he said quickly. "She said you're the most focused person she's ever known. That you built your whole life from scratch after losing everything. She admired that." I took a slow sip of coffee. "That's generous of her." "She also said she could never live up to you." That hit harder than I expected. "She shouldn't have to." "She tried, though," he said quietly. "That's what made it hard between us. I was always comparing her to the woman who raised her." I blinked. "You're saying you dated my daughter because you admired me?" He met my eyes, steady, unapologetic. I didn't realize that's what it was until much later. The air between us changed. I felt the weight of his words settle. Not inappropriate, not crude, just honest. Raw in a way I hadn't been in years. I leaned back, trying to laugh it off. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not?" "It's true. Because it sounds like you're flirting with me." He tilted his head, his gaze unwavering. "Maybe I am." The sunlight caught in his hair, and for a second the cafe blurred. I heard only my heartbeat. "I'm your ex-girlfriend's mother," I said. "And I'm just buying coffee with her," he countered easily. "You can relax, Caroline." But I couldn't. There was nothing relaxed about the way he said my name. Nothing relaxed about the way his thumb brushed the edge of his glass, tracing slow circles while his eyes held mine. He wasn't playing games. He wasn't trying to impress me. He was just being himself, unfiltered, alive, untamed in a way I hadn't been in years. After coffee, we walked out into the bright afternoon. The street shimmered in heat, palm trees throwing patterned shadows on the pavement. "You live nearby?" he asked. 10 minutes away. "I'll walk you to your car." "I don't need an escort." Maybe I just don't want the conversation to end yet. I should have said no. I should have ended it there like any rational woman would. But rationality has never won against curiosity. We walked side by side, the silence between us stretching and softening. He talked about the startup he was working for, something about digital marketing and travel campaigns, and how he missed working with his hands, fixing things, building something tangible. "Maybe that's why I liked your husband's car," he said. "It's real. It doesn't hide behind screens or filters." "You sound like an old soul," I said. He smirked. That's what people say when they don't want to admit they're intrigued. He was right. We reached my car and I stopped. "This is me." He nodded, hands in his pockets, sunlight catching on the chain at his throat. I should go, but he didn't move. Neither did I. "Caroline," he said softly. "Can I ask you something?" "Depends. Why'd you really sell the car?" I blinked. "I told you. I needed to let go." He shook his head. "No. You needed someone to take it, so you wouldn't have to keep seeing what you lost." The truth of it landed like a hit I didn't see coming. I exhaled, a shaky laugh slipping out. "You really don't hold back, do you? I don't think you like people who do." Something in me snapped. Not anger, not desire, but a thread of control fraying just enough to let the light in. "You think you know me?" I asked, stepping closer. His eyes dropped briefly to my lips before he caught himself. "Not yet. But I want to." The honesty of it caught me off guard. No pretense, no performance, just truth. "You're trouble," I murmured. "Maybe," he said, voice lower now, "but you don't look like someone afraid of a little trouble." The world went quiet around us. Just sunlight, our shadows close on the pavement, his breath syncing with mine. I wanted to walk away. I wanted to remind myself that he was off limits, that this connection, whatever it was wrong. But in that silence, something deeper pulsed between us. Recognition. The kind that doesn't ask for permission. He finally stepped back, as if sensing I was at my limit. "I'll see you around, Caroline." "Don't count on it," I said, but my voice didn't sound convincing. He smiled knowingly, like he already had. I thought that was the end of it. until he texted me 2 days later. "Liam, did you mean it when you said you liked control?" I stared at the screen, heart pounding. "Me? Why?" "Liam, because I don't think control is what you really want. I should have deleted it. I should have blocked his number. But instead I typed back, 'Me, what do you think I want then?' Liam, someone who sees you. Not what you pretend to be," I didn't reply. But I didn't delete it either. The next morning, I found myself driving past the same cafe, scanning the tables through the window like some part of me was looking for him. When I finally saw him, sitting outside, sunlight catching his face, that same undone collar, I realized I wasn't just curious anymore. I was drawn. And when he looked up, saw me through the glass and smiled, that quiet, knowing smile, I didn't turn away. I walked inside. I should have known it wouldn't stay secret for long. Los Angeles has a way of magnifying what you try to hide. The sunlight exposes everything, even the feelings you think you've buried deep enough. By the time I realized what was happening between Liam and me, we were already past the point of denial. It started simply. Coffee turning into conversations. Conversations turning into something like routine. He'd text me, and I'd answer without hesitation. He'd show up, and I'd pretend I wasn't waiting for him. We never called it anything. But every time his eyes met mine, I felt like he saw through the walls I'd spent years building. I kept telling myself it was harmless, that it was connection, not romance, that grief makes you cling to light wherever you find it. But the truth, he made me feel alive in a way I hadn't since before I buried my husband. One afternoon, he came over to drop off the old registration papers for the car. At least that's what he said. The house was flooded with sunlight, the glass doors open to the garden. I was wearing a white linen shirt, sleeves rolled up, hair pulled back loosely. He leaned against the doorframe, casual as ever, black shirt unbuttoned at the top, the chain glinting against his collarbone. "Nice place," he said, stepping inside. "Looks different in daylight." "It's always daylight," I said. "I don't do shadows," he smiled faintly. "Yeah, I noticed." He set the envelope down on the counter. But he didn't leave. He lingered, fingers tracing the marble, his eyes scanning the room, the photographs, the small signs of a life rebuilt. "Paige used to talk about this house," he said quietly. "She said it felt like a museum," I frowned. "A museum?" "Beautiful," he said, but untouched. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. She wasn't wrong. His gaze found mine again. It doesn't feel that way now. I turned away, pretending to busy myself with the papers, but his words stayed in the air, soft, deliberate, like they'd been waiting to be said. When I looked up, he was closer. Too close. "You keep looking at me like you're trying not to," he said. "I'm not," I lied. He stepped closer, just enough that I could feel his breath. "Then stop pretending." The world slowed. Sunlight through glass, dust in the air, his eyes locked on mine. Nothing else existed. I didn't move. Neither did he. It wasn't about touch. It wasn't even about desire. It was the unbearable intimacy of being seen. And that's when I realized I wasn't afraid of him. I was afraid of myself. Afraid of what it meant to want something forbidden, not out of recklessness, but out of need. I took a slow breath. "Liam," he shook his head, voice low. "You don't have to say it." "I do." I forced myself to meet his gaze. "You dated my daughter. Whatever this is, it can't go anywhere." He swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "I know." But the silence that followed said everything neither of us dared to. He stepped back, and the distance felt colder than I expected. "Then at least let me thank you," he said softly, "for letting me see you, even for a little while." He walked out, sunlight swallowing him as the door closed. And I stood there, heart pounding, hands trembling, realizing I'd just pushed away something I'd spent months pretending I didn't want. Days passed. I threw myself into work, errands, anything that kept my mind busy. But every quiet moment was an echo of him. His voice, his honesty, his way of looking at me like I was still worth wanting. Then the fallout came. Paige showed up unannounced one morning, her voice bright until she saw the car in the driveway. His car. "Mom," she said slowly, "why is Liam's car here?" I froze. "He left some papers," I said carefully. "We finalized the sale last week." Her eyes narrowed, searching my face for the lie. "You've been talking to him?" "I've seen him a couple times," I admitted. "Nothing," she cut me off. "You're kidding, right? He's my ex." "I know." "Mom, he's 24. I know that too." The room filled with tension, the kind that hums between generations when both think they're right. "Do you like him?" she demanded. I didn't answer. Maybe I couldn't. Her expression softened just enough to break my heart. "You can't, Mom. It's wrong." And maybe it was. But wrong and impossible aren't always the same thing. After she left, I sat by the window for hours, sunlight pouring across the floor, my reflection fractured by the glass. It would have been easier to go back to the quiet, to bury what I felt beneath dignity and guilt. But something had shifted in me. For years I'd lived like a ghost of the woman I used to be. And for the first time I wanted to live again, fully, recklessly, honestly. I didn't expect to see him again. But life, as I'd learned, doesn't care about plans. I ran into him on a rooftop terrace a week later, a friend's art show. The city sprawled below us, the golden light of early evening washing everything in warmth. He turned when he heard my voice, surprise flashing across his face before melting into something softer. "Caroline." "Liam." Neither of us knew what to say. Then he smiled faintly. "You look lighter." "I'm not," I said. "But I'm trying," he nodded. "That's all that matters." For a long moment, we just stood there, the city stretching around us, the hum of laughter and clinking glasses fading into background noise. "I shouldn't be here," I said finally. "Neither should I," he said. "But I am." He stepped closer, stopping just short of touching me. "You don't owe anyone your silence." I looked up at him, the sunlight turning his eyes almost gold. "You make it sound easy. It's not," he said. "But some things are worth the noise." And then, without permission, without pretense, I smiled. Because he was right. I'd spent my whole life being careful. Managing, maintaining, surviving. But love, real love, wasn't meant to be controlled. It was meant to be lived, so I reached out. Just a touch. My fingers brushing his wrist, light as air. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just breathed, steady, reverent, waiting. For the first time in years, I didn't hold back. I leaned in, resting my forehead against his chest. He let out a quiet breath, his hand finding mine, not possessive, not demanding. Just there, we stayed that way, the city glowing around us, two people who shouldn't have met, shouldn't have crossed, shouldn't have found this strange peace, but did anyway. When I finally pulled back, I said the words that felt truest. "I don't know where this goes." "Then let it go somewhere," he said. "We'll figure it out." The simplicity of it undid me. No grand declarations. No promises, just the quiet courage of choosing to feel. Weeks later, the world didn't end. Paige came around, slowly, cautiously, after realizing he wasn't a secret anymore. People talked, of course. They always do. But judgment loses its sting when you stop needing permission to be happy. Now, when I drive past that cafe, sometimes he's there. Sometimes he's not. Sometimes we meet, sometimes we don't. But every time I see that black car parked in the sun, I remember that moment, the one where control slipped through my fingers and I finally let life touch me again. I used to think letting go meant losing. Now I know it means opening. And every time his eyes meet mine, that same patient, knowing look, I feel it. The quiet promise we never said out loud. That maybe, just maybe, after all the loss, I've finally found something that feels like sunlight again. If this story pulled you in, hit subscribe, like, and drop a comment below. Tell me what part hit hardest, the confession, the forbidden spark, or that final moment of surrender under the sunlight.